Clara had learned long ago that a quiet life in a small town was not the same as a peaceful one. The town looked peaceful from the outside: wooden houses, dusty roads, a church bell that rang slow and soft, and neighbors who smiled politely on the street. But behind those warm smiles lived sharp eyes and quick tongues. People talked here. They talked about everything, especially about people who didn't fit their idea of perfect. Clara knew that better than anyone. Every morning she walked from her small rented room above the inn to the kitchen downstairs, tying her apron as she went. She had worked at the inn since she was 17, cleaning rooms, cooking simple meals, and greeting travelers who passed through. She was good at her work, quiet and respectful, and she never caused trouble. But even then, whispers followed her like dust on the wind. They came from mistakes she made, from the heartbreaks she went through, from the way a few men in town had spoken about her unfairly. Rumors grew like wild weeds. And once they grew, no one cared to pull them out. Still, Clara kept her head down and continued working. She had no family left, no close friends, and no one to defend her name. She only had herself. Some days, that felt like enough. Other days, she felt like she was carrying the whole world alone. One early morning, she stepped outside to shake dust from a rug. The sunrise painted the sky with soft pink and orange colors, and for a moment, she enjoyed the cool air before the heat came. Then she noticed a rider coming down the long road, a tall cowboy on a chestnut horse. He rode slowly, shoulders tired, hat low over his eyes. She had never seen him before. The horse stopped in front of the inn. The cowboy lifted his head, and Clara noticed something different about him. Not dangerous, not arrogant, but quiet, calm. A man who had seen too many roads and carried too many stories. "Morning," he said gently. Clara nodded with polite distance. "Good morning. Need a room?" "Yes," he answered. "Just for a few days. Maybe more, if work shows up." Clara guided him inside, keeping her voice steady and her face expressionless. She had learned to stay careful. Being friendly only led to problems. Men either misunderstood or judged. She was tired of both. The cowboy introduced himself as Elias. He spoke softly, paid for his room in advance, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. After taking his key, he thanked her with a sincere nod before heading upstairs. Clara watched him go, unsure what to think. Most men who came through town were loud or full of pride. Elias seemed neither. Later that afternoon, Clara carried a stack of clean towels toward the guest rooms. As she turned a corner, she heard two local men talking near the stairwell. Their voices were low, but she knew the tone. She had heard it many times before. "You see the new cowboy?" one said. "He spoke to Clara this morning." "Poor man," the other replied with a laugh. "He doesn't know her history." Someone should warn him. Clara felt her stomach tighten. She froze where she stood, not wanting to listen, but unable to move away. "Women like her," the first man continued. "They bring trouble, broken hearts, broken promises. She's not the type you get close to." Clara swallowed hard and stepped back, trying not to be seen. She quietly returned to the hallway, her hands shaking slightly. She thought she had grown used to such words, but every time they came, they cut her again. She set the towels down and leaned against the wall for a moment. She hated that she cared. She hated that the past people created for her mattered more than the truth. She had made mistakes. Yes. She had trusted the wrong people and believed lies, but she had never deserved the rumors that had followed her for years. By the time she returned to the kitchen, she had forced her expression back into calmness. Work helped her keep her mind steady. The inn owner asked her to prepare supper for the few guests staying that night. Clara moved around the kitchen, cutting vegetables, stirring a pot of soup, focusing on the rhythm of her hands. When the meal was ready, she carried the plates out to the dining area. Elias sat at one of the tables alone, reading a folded newspaper. When he saw her approaching, he set it aside and gave her a polite nod. "Thank you," he said softly when she placed the plate in front of him. "You're welcome," Clara replied without meeting his eyes. She turned to leave. But Elias spoke again, gently. "You look tired." Clara paused, unsure if he meant it as small talk or concern. She didn't respond immediately. "It's been a long day," she finally said, keeping her tone neutral. "Long days happen to all of us," he replied. "But some people carry more weight than others." His words surprised her. She almost dropped her calm expression. Most people didn't talk like that. Not with understanding, not without judgment. Clara simply nodded and walked away before she could say something foolish. She didn't want kindness from a stranger. Kindness usually came with expectations she could not fulfill. Later that evening, when she stepped outside to empty a bucket of old water, she saw Elias near the horseshoe post, adjusting his horse's saddle strap. Two local men approached him, the same men who had spoken badly about her earlier. Clara froze in the shadow, watching. "You must be new around here," one man said with a smirk. "We heard you met Clara this morning." Elias didn't respond immediately. He simply tightened the strap and looked up slowly. "We thought we'd give you some advice," the second man continued. "She looks kind, but she's not someone you want to get close to." Elias studied them carefully. "Why?" he asked calmly. The men exchanged looks, surprised he didn't accept their words instantly. "Because she's complicated," the first man muttered. "She's had history, the kind that follows her." Elias gave a faint, almost tired sigh. He brushed dust from his hands before speaking. "You talk like you know her life," he said, "but all I hear are stories." "It's not stories," the second man insisted. "Ask around. Everyone knows." Elias raised a hand, stopping him politely but firmly. "I don't judge people based on town gossip," he said. "If something is worth knowing, I'll hear it from the person herself, not from men who whisper behind her back." The two men stiffened, offended. But Elias didn't raise his voice or show anger. He simply stood tall, stable, and honest. The men muttered something under their breaths and walked away. Clara stood in the shadows, stunned. She had never heard anyone speak for her like that, not without having something to gain. Not without pity. Not without expecting something in return. Elias turned slightly, as if sensing someone nearby. Clara stepped forward instinctively, the bucket still in her hand. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Elias looked at her with steady eyes. "Maybe, but it needed to be said." Clara tightened her grip on the bucket. "You don't know me." "Not yet," he replied simply. "But I'd rather learn the truth from you than from men who enjoy talking." Clara's heart gave a painful twist. She didn't know if she should thank him or walk away to protect herself. She had trusted kind voices before, and paid the price. "You should keep your distance," she whispered. "People talk. They always talk." "I don't live my life by what people say," Elias answered. Clara looked down at her shoes, unable to hold his gaze. "You'll think differently once you hear everything." He shook his head slowly. "I don't want their version. I want yours." The words hit her deeply, almost painfully. No one had ever said that to her. No one had cared about her truth. She felt her throat tighten and looked away quickly, afraid he would see the emotion in her eyes. "I should finish my work," she said softly. Elias nodded. "I'll see you around." Clara walked back inside, her steps slow and her mind overwhelmed. For the first time in years, she felt something warm rising inside her: hope, confusion, fear, and something that felt dangerously close to trust. She didn't know who Elias truly was or why he cared, but she knew one thing with certainty. He was not like the others, and that scared her more than anything. Clara tried telling herself that Elias didn't matter. She tried telling herself that he was only a traveler passing through, a man who would leave after a few weeks and forget her name like everyone else. But no matter how many times she repeated these thoughts, she could not ignore the way he looked at her with respect, not curiosity, with calmness, not judgment. It confused her, it scared her, and yet, it slowly warmed the cold corners of her heart. Elias stayed at the inn longer than expected. He found work at a nearby ranch, helping with cattle and fixing broken fences. Every morning before he left, Clara saw him in the dining hall. He always gave her a small nod, not demanding attention, not acting familiar, just acknowledging her as a person who deserved to be seen. She pretended not to care, but her heart always beat a little faster. Over time, Elias began helping with small things around the inn. If he noticed a loose board on the porch, he fixed it. When the inn's back door hinge squeaked, he oiled it. He never said much while doing these things. He simply worked quietly, as if helping gave him peace. One afternoon, Clara was carrying a heavy bucket of water toward the washing area when her foot slipped on a loose stone. Before she could fall, Elias caught her by the elbow, steadying her with gentle strength. She blinked, startled. "Careful," he said softly. Clara took a step back quickly, embarrassed by how close they had been. "I'm fine," she murmured. "I know," Elias replied. "But you don't have to carry everything alone." His words were simple, but Clara felt them deeply. She wasn't used to anyone offering help not without expecting something in return. She looked down at the bucket, her voice quiet. "I'm used to doing things myself." Elias nodded. Being used to something doesn't mean it's the best way. Clara didn't know how to respond, so she continued walking. But as she walked, she felt the weight of her loneliness more clearly than ever before. Maybe she wanted someone to share her burdens. Maybe she wanted someone to stay. A few days later, Clara sat on the back steps during her short break, her hands resting on her lap. Elias joined her, keeping a respectful distance. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the wind. "You don't talk much," Clara finally said. "Talking isn't always needed," Elias answered. "Sometimes sitting beside someone tells more." Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly. "What do you think it tells?" "That you're not alone," he said. For a long moment, they didn't talk. Clara felt something shifting inside her, something she had kept locked away for years. But before she could say anything more, the innkeeper called her inside for help. She stood up quickly. "Thank you for the company," she said softly. Elias tipped his hat in acknowledgement. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, Clara started opening up. She told Elias about her childhood, about losing her parents, and about how she ended up working at the inn. She didn't go into every detail, but she told him enough to show the truth behind her cautious heart. Elias listened with quiet attention, never interrupting, never judging. One evening, they stood near the corral watching the sunset paint the sky in deep gold and purple. Clara felt calm beside him in a way she hadn't felt in years. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Why do you keep being kind to me?" she asked quietly. "You could talk to anyone else in town. You could choose someone who doesn't have a complicated past." Elias turned toward her, his expression gentle but serious. "Everyone has a past." "Not like mine," Clara whispered. "Pain is pain," he replied. "Struggle is struggle. It doesn't matter what shape it came in." Clara looked down at her hands. "People think I'm not someone you build a future with. Do you believe that?" he asked. She hesitated. She didn't want to believe it, but the years of judgment had buried her confidence. "Sometimes," she said quietly. "Sometimes I feel broken. Broken. Broken." Elias stepped a little closer, still careful, still respectful. Clara felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with pity, not with admiration, but with understanding. And what if, she began slowly, what if someone tried to break me? What if people think I'm weak because of my mistakes? Elias shook his head. You kept standing. That makes you stronger than any rumor. Elias, not for. Elias, not for. Clara blinked fast, trying to hold back the emotion rising inside her. You don't want someone with an innocent past. Someone simple and untouched. Elias looked straight into her eyes, his voice steady and warm. I never wanted that. I didn't want a perfect story. I didn't want a life that had never been tested. He paused, letting his words sink into her heart. I didn't want a woman untouched by the world. I wanted the woman everyone else tried to break and failed. Clara felt her heart tremble. She had never heard anything so honest, so unexpected. She turned her face slightly, afraid tears might fall. Elias didn't touch her or move closer. He simply waited. After a long moment, Clara whispered, And why would you want someone like that? Loader. In writer. Always. Because strength is real, Elias said. You lived through storms and still choose kindness. That's the kind of person you build a life with. Clara wiped her cheek quickly, embarrassed. I'm not always kind. You try, Elias replied. Trying matters more than perfection. They stood together in silence again. The sky darkened, and a cool breeze brushed past them. Clara felt her fears loosening, melting under the weight of Elias's sincerity. The next few days became easier. Clara walked with more confidence. When people whispered, she didn't shrink away, not anymore. And when she caught Elias watching her from a distance, she didn't feel fear. She felt supported. At the inn, the other workers noticed the change in her. She smiled more. She spoke more freely. Even the customers treated her differently, sensing her quiet strength. It was as if Elias's respect had created space for others to respect her, too. One evening, after the day's work ended, Clara asked Elias to walk with her to the top of a small hill behind the town. She had gone there in her loneliest years, sitting under a tree where no one could see her cry or think or breathe freely. It was her secret place. They reached the hilltop just as the stars began to appear. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, looking at the town below. I used to come here when everything felt heavy, she said quietly. When I felt like the whole town hated me. Elias stood beside her. And you still stood up every day. You still worked. You still lived. Clara turned to him. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know what the future holds, but I don't want to face it alone anymore. You don't have to, Elias said gently, but only if you want someone beside you. Clara took a slow breath. I do. Elias's voice softened. I didn't come to fix you, Clara. I know, she whispered. I came to stand beside you. Clara felt something inside her finally settle a peace she had never known. She stepped closer, not out of fear or need, but out of choice. He simply opened his arms slightly, inviting but not insisting. Clara rested her forehead against his chest for a brief moment, and he wrapped her in a gentle embrace, steady and warm. Under the quiet sky, Clara realized that she wasn't the woman people tried to break anymore. She was the woman who survived, the woman who healed, the woman someone finally saw with true eyes. And together, they walked down the hill, not perfect, but whole.